Hey, what's up guys? capnbozzy here, and this is Mass Effect 3 Multiplayer N7 Academy Part 12. And in this episode, we'll be covering the Asari Justicar Adept, who is one of my absolute favorite biotic characters in the game. So let's check out her powers. So the first thing here that sets the Justicar apart from a lot of the other Asaris is that she has Biotic Sphere. She's the only character in this game with this power, and I gotta say, it's pretty awesome power. So what this power does is basically you can use it in two different ways. One is to create a defensive shield that surrounds the caster and nearby allies, and so whenever your teammates and you get inside of this bubble, it basically restores your shields, and that's the defensive way to use it. The offensive way to use it is basically to cast it out in the field, and then whenever enemies walk into it, and this can be up to 3 enemies, they'll get primed for biotic explosions, and there'll be like a warp effect on them. So it's like walking into the bubble is like them getting hit by warp. So then you can then of course detonate that power with Reeve, and of course any of your other teammates who have biotic powers can detonate it as well. So it's just a really great power that you can put in choke points around the map, so that whenever enemies, and this is great for enemies like brutes and things like that, who have a very straight path that they go on, that you can very easily start doing damage to them immediately, and prime them for a biotic explosion. And using this power in the right way can really enhance the speed at which you can take down enemies on your team. And I've played with some really fun games with other biotics on the team when I was playing with this kit, and man, like I said, it can make a huge difference when you have someone using Biotic Sphere in the right way, putting it in strategic choke points where the enemies are walking through, because you just start like an assembly line of these biotic detonations going off, and it's really fun. Okay, and of course I'll demonstrate that once we get into the game. Alright, so the way I spec this, like I said, I use this offensively rather than defensively. So I use this in order to do damage on enemies rather than to restore the shields or barriers of teammates. Okay, so first thing here, I definitely suggest going with radius to create the biggest possible biotic sphere as possible, and that's over shield regeneration. As for 5, I use of course, so enemy weakness here. So this increases the damage taken by enemies who walk into the bubble, and that's of course versus damage reduction. So this is just if you wanted your allies to have some more shield strength, then this is what you would use for that. And then of course for the last one here, for warp effect, this is what sets up the enemies for biotic detonations. As enemies walk into the shield, it deals, of course, 57.5 damage per second, reduces their armor by 25%, and like I said, this can affect up to 3 enemies at a time. And that's versus just doing more protection for your allies with their shields. So this is a pretty easy thing to spec, depending on what you want to try. Obviously, if you want to go for the defensive approach, and that is to provide more protection for your teammates, then of course you really want to just go with all of the A ranks here. And if you want to go defensive, just go with all the B ranks. So that's pretty straightforward. Alright, so next up here is Reeve. And of course what Reeve does, it drains a target's health and disrupts their resistances, and you receive increased damage protection while your Reeve is effective, is being used on an enemy. So Reeve is a really great power because it has a really fast cooldown, so you can just keep Reeving over and over and over again. And Reeve sets up enemies for biotic detonations, and it can also detonate. So it is both a primer and a detonator. So if another teammate were to use warp on an enemy, and then you used Reeve on them, you could detonate that. And also it would be the opposite. If you Reeved an enemy and then they threw warp, someone else on your team threw warp at them, then you can do that combo as well. And of course, I'll go into pool right after this, but that's really the main combo that you're going to be doing with this, is using pool on enemies to get them lifted into the air, and then you're going to reave them to detonate it. Okay, so with reave here, really you could go... Yeah, I would definitely say that go with radius here on this, just because you want to be able to reach enemies all the way across the map if you need to, with radius. And with duration, it's really not that important. I mean, that would really be more important if you're fighting against enemies, bosses, because most of the enemies that you're going to be reaving, of course, the majority of the enemies in the game are going to be lower level enemies who are going to die fast anyway. So having that extra duration on them is not going to be all that useful, versus having, guaranteeing that when you, try to get a lock on an enemy for doing, reave on them across the map, that you can reach them. Okay, and then another property, of course, like I said earlier with reave, is that it gives you some damage protection. So whenever you reave an enemy with with shields and barriers, well, I think it actually works on any type of enemy. Any type of enemy that you reave, it will drain their health, and basically it will, in return, it will give you an extra damage protection, an extra layer of damage protection. So it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same as something like energy drain, which immediately as you drain someone's one of the enemy's shields or barriers, it steals it and puts it back into your shield or barrier bar. This is more like just like a slow moving, kind of like it drains it, of course. So it happens kind of over time rather than immediately. All right, so this is just some more damage protection, and once again, this has a pretty fast cooldown speed. I mean, this is already 2.87 seconds. You'll barely even, register that. If you do 35% on that, it's going to be, you're barely even going to notice it, so it's not even worth it. Definitely go with the damage protection. And then lastly here, you could go either way with this. I personally go with barriers and armor, just because 75% is such a major increase. And of course you're going to be doing this, on tons of enemies with armor and barriers. So you definitely want, to be just chipping away at those bosses. The ones who have, of course, armor and barriers. So things like banshees and brutes. You just want to be hitting them over and over and over again, doing combos on them, and that will, drain them down really, really fast, and of course weaken the armor and everything. So yeah, you could go either way with this. I mean, doing extra damage and duration is certainly not bad. I mean, this is really like you really could go either way on this. I just think that armor and barriers against bosses, that's definitely pretty important. Okay, so then for pool here, I really suggest only doing the first 3 of pool, because you're only really going to be using pool just to set up biotic detonations with reave, and you're only going to be doing that on enemies that are mooks. So of course, doing pool on an enemy like a boss is not going to have any effect on them. So what you want to do is, like, if a husk or a cannibal or something like that, or a marauder, after you strip his shields, you want to throw pool on him, and that will lift him into the air, and then you can detonate him with reave, or a teammate can detonate that. So that's the way you want to go with that. The rest of the powers here with pool, impact radius, you're usually not going to be using pool across the map or anything. You're going to be using reave for that. And duration, I mean, if they're in the air, they're going to die immediately probably. Lift damage, that's not too bad. Same with expose is okay too. This would be, if you really wanted to rank up this to get more biotic detonations, this would be the only thing that's really worth it. Recharge speed, this is another power that recharges really fast, so you definitely don't need that. This would be the only thing that's worth it, really, for upgrading pool all the way. Okay, then Asari Justicar. The way I have her spec'd here is really just to increase her powers. So she's, of course, like I said, a very power-based kit. She's all about doing biotic detonations. So that's why I have the power duration here over the weapon damage bonus, and also the weight capacity to help my cooldowns go a bit faster, and also of course the power damage here as well. So you want your powers just doing just a little bit more damage, just to make you a little bit more effective. And I am using the Harrier, so if you wanted to spec this more to give you some more weapon damage, and that's also not a bad way to go. You really could go either way with that. And lastly here, if you wanted to go all the way with this, like I said, I definitely do suggest using like a assault rifle, and either assault rifle and pistol combo, or an SMG and pistol combo. And so if you're using assault rifle, this could make sense, but really her cooldowns are pretty fast, so I don't think that's necessary. And once again, if you just wanted to spec her a different way to go with more weapon damage, then this would be the way to go. And lastly here with fitness, I just have her spec'd out for health and shield bonuses all the way. So this is just of course more shields, and this is shield recharge delay, and this is for some extra shields as well. Her melee is really not all that great in my opinion. Of course, like her light melee is just a typical, just like she's just hitting someone with their gun. She's it's a fast movement. And whereas the heavy melee, she does like the biotic kind of like charge build up, where she just like kind of charges her up and unleashes this kind of like, how would I put it, like rip curl like this wave of bionic energy that like makes that knocks enemies back a bit. The problem with it is that it doesn't really do enough damage to be worth using, and it ends up making you vulnerable because she has to go through an animation. So while it looks really cool, it's unfortunately not really that great of a heavy melee. And like I said, especially when you're playing on platinum or something, you have to be really careful about using it, because you do it at the wrong time, and if there's just another enemy around the corner and you're vulnerable for just that short amount of time, you're probably going to get killed. So of course I'll show you that once we get in the game, so you see what I mean. Alright, so on to weapons here. Like I said, I suggest using an assault rifle and pistol combo, or an SMG and pistol combo. If you have the Harrier, that's probably the best way to go with her. Could also use something like, let's see, the Lancer would also be decent, although the Lancer's kind of heavy. Particle rifle as well isn't a bad idea with her. And of course, if you are just starting out and don't have too much unlocked, the Avenger and the Matic are definitely good ways to go. But overall, I would definitely suggest going with the Harrier with her. And what I use is the ultralight materials to increase your cooldown speed, and just the assault rifle magazine upgrade. Pretty much for anytime you ever use a Harrier, you're always going to want to use the magazine upgrade, because that's just one of its cons, is that it just has kind of a low amount of ammo. And then of course I use my normal sidearm that I use is the Acolyte, and I just use that with ultralight materials and with some increased damage with the high caliber barrel. Okay, so then moving on to equipment here. Depending on what team you're playing with, if you're playing with an all biotic team, then obviously the only thing really worth using is Warp Rounds 4, and that's what I basically always use with her. If I'm playing on a mixed team with some other players who have or are tech oriented, then maybe sometimes I'll go with incendiary rounds, but pretty much always I just go with Warp Rounds, just to go with biotic stuff with her all through and through. And then, of course, if you have assault rifle amp, then that's really what you want to use over a pistol amp. I just don't have an assault rifle amp at the moment, so I'm using a pistol amp. So, of course, just either one of those. And if you don't have either of those, using a targeting VI is the way to go. And then I definitely suggest going with a cyclonic modulator. Even with all of her you know, shields and everything leveled up. She's still a little bit squishy. I mean, of all the Asari, she's actually probably one of the you know, more tankier ones. With the tankiest probably being the Sentinel, because she has the tech armor, and of course also the Vanguard, since she can restore her shields. But just with, you know, regular powers and with biotic charge aside, she's definitely this Asari is definitely more tankier than like the vanilla Asari, and but still I still suggest going with the cyclonic modulator. If you don't have a cyclonic modulator, or you just feel like you'd rather use something else, you could certainly go with adrenaline mod to make her faster. Asaris are already pretty quick, so that's not something I usually use with them. But for any reason, if you have any issues with your cooldown speeds, the way you spec out your powers, you could also go with an efficiency module. Also, a amplifier mod would not be a bad idea, and really suggest those over a stabilization module, although that's also not bad to have for a Harrier. Alright, and then lastly here, I personally use the combatives upgrade, since I use an assault rifle and pistol with her, and this is where I compensate for you know, not putting any points into her weapon damage, so I just do it here. If you do spec her differently so that she has the weapon damage in the other slots rather than the increased power damage, then if you want to, you know, do more compensation to give her more power damage or recharge speed, then of course you could also go with something like a commando package. That's for some more biotic damage and pistol damage. Another thing, if you're using an SMG with her, then expert package V would be, expert package 5 would be another one. You could also go with, I don't really suggest Martial Biotic Amp, because you're not going to really be doing too much meleeing with her. But you know, some people, when you're just starting out, if you may not have everything unlocked, so this may be the only like biotic thing you have available to you. So I don't really need to go through the rest of these. I know there's a couple other ones here. And of course also like a shield booster is never a bad idea as well, if you don't have you know, a lot of gear. If you don't have a cyclonic modulator, this may be how you need to compensate for that. Okay. So basically with that, you know, as long as you're just well-rounded, you have something that's you know, compensating for weapon damage, you have something to help out with shields, and you know, you just have a well-rounded build with her, then that's really the best way to go. Okay, so that's everything with this particular build, so let's jump into a match. Okay, so for my keybinds in the top left, for Biotic Sphere, I personally use middle mouse button or 3 as my secondary to cast the Biotic Sphere, and I'll show you that right now. So that's casting it right there, and of course that's a kind of a choke point. You know, enemies will be coming around in this area to get over here to where I am. So you know, whenever they walk in here, they're going to be, you can see, primed just like that. So they were primed immediately, like they were hit with a warp. So all I have to do as soon as they walk in there is hit them with a reeve, and that will detonate them for the biotic explosion. So really, really cool, as you can see here, just how effective this is. I mean, this is just like I said, it's kind of like creating your own little assembly line of biotic explosions here. It really is awesome, and when you have a great biotic team, like I said, they'll be utilizing this correctly, and you'll just be killing enemies so fast. I mean, it's just outrageous. Okay, so I'll show you here just doing a basic combo with Pool and Reeve. So I'm going to strip this Marauder's shields. Okay, I'm going to hit him with Pool, so he's lifted in the air. Oh, I hit him with another Acolyte, sorry. Alright, I'll do this guy. Alright, so he's lifted in the air, and then bam, there's the biotic explosion with Reeve. And of course I didn't finish the keybinds. I use X for my Reeve and I use F for pool. So I'll just do another pool on that husk and then bam, get that biotic explosion with him with Reeve. Here's another one. So you can see she's just, when it comes to doing biotic explosions, she's just like a, you know, freaking monster. So alright, so all three of them just got primed there. And bam. One Reeve, 3 kills. Amazing. So another thing I want to point out is just how Reeve works with the damage protection. So I need to get hit a little bit. Let this cannibal hit me. Okay, so he's being Reeved right now. Well, I guess you can't really tell. You can't really tell with Reeve because it gives you the extra damage protection, but that's just like, I guess, invisible with stats. That's not something that you can physically see in the in your actual barrier bar. But regardless, let's just pretend. So when I hit these guys with Reeve, it's giving me an extra damage protection layer. So that's also another benefit of Reeve, as well as, of course, draining their health and priming for both priming and detonating for biotic explosions. All right, another thing, of course, is her melee. So here's her heavy melee. So you can see there just how long it takes for that animation to take place and for her to recover from it. So you can just imagine that, you know, if you're surrounded by enemies and you do that at the wrong time, that, you know, obviously the enemies who are immediately around her will get knocked back by it, and maybe some will even die if they're almost dead. But for the most part, it can be pretty dangerous because it leaves you vulnerable as she goes through the animation and has to recover from the animation. So, you know, just be careful about that. So that's really about it. And of course, here's her light melee. You know, pretty typical. So I'll just finish 3 rounds like I usually do, just to see her against, you know, a Banshee and things like that, and then we'll wrap this up. There you go, strip that Marauder, lift him with pool, and then detonate him with Reeve. And also her dodge, that's another really great thing about Asari's, is they have this kind of like slide dodge, which is really great. That's definitely one of the better dodges in the game. And she can do that front, back, you know, in all directions. So of course I'm just going to put this in his pass, so now he's covered. And bam, get that explosion on him.
Got it! Lead now. Lock shield!
Clean sweep. Well done. Stay alert. Enemy is regrouping.
Alright, let's just finish this round.
Locate the central server down there. They have hack started. Remain
Contact!
closer. We need access to that data terminal. Hack the security.
Got it! Go, go, go!
Alright, so I got my bubble out for her. There he goes. Set her up to go into it so I can detonate that with Reeve.
Connection broken. Reacquire.
Understood.
We got interference. Get back in range. Connection down. Get closer. Half the security protocols have been breached. Maintain connection.
I'm hit!
Connection down. Get to the data terminal.
Oh, damn it. I got stuck on the wall. The biggest killer in Mass Effect 3.
They got me!
Yeah. Oh boy. Still got plenty of time. Always important when you're soloing not to panic. Shit happens.
Your mission is to hack the terminal. Get on it.
I always love when I do these videos and the game gives me these these hard objectives.
Shields down!
Data retrieved.
Need clip!
You can see there, just setting up that biotic sphere and those choke points. You can just get really easy to get multiple kills. And he just walked right into it.
Top marks, team.
Okay.
Neutralized!
Stay alert. Enemy is regrouping.
It was a little rough, but hey. It was all demonstrated, right? So I hope you found this video useful, and stay tuned for the next one where I will cover, let's see, how about the human engineer? That sounds fun. All right, so thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. capnbozzy out.